I'm gonna go ahead and start the recording. There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday book launch. We are so fortunate to be in the good company of one another. And also we get to celebrate with Scott Owens today, which is one of my favorite poets, favorite humans, and poetry community member. Most of y'all already know him, but you will be hearing from two different books today: An Augury of Birds, and then also Eventually, which is a book of haiku. Both of them are out with Red Hawk Press. um, you are in for a treat, though. This is multimedia. Scott's bringing a whole nother level. Scott Owens has been a bird watcher for 42 years. He is the author of 21 collections of poetry and recipient of awards from the Academy of American Poets, the Pushcart Prize Anthology, the Next Generation Indie Lit Awards, the North Carolina Network, Writers Network, the North Carolina Poetry Society, of course, and the Poetry Society also of South Carolina. His poems have been featured on the Writer's Almanac 8 different times, and his articles about writing poetry have been used in Poets Market a total of 4 different times. That'll go up, though. He has twice been nominated for a National Book Critics Circle Award and also to be the North Carolina Poet Laureate. And I can see why. Scott, I'm so glad you're here tonight. And I'm going to ask people to be patient with me as we do this multimedia thing. So we'll be doing share screen. Should I go to that now?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Why?
I'm glad you're here, Scott. Thank you so very
Thank you
much.
for having me, and thank everyone for joining us. Oh, that's awesome. It looks very nice on screen. So yeah, I guess I'm just going to jump right in with the first poem, which is obviously about kestrels. They have long been one of my favorite birds. The first kestrel I saw and knew that I was seeing a kestrel was as a student on the campus of Ohio University. And this bird that I thought was maybe a blue jay or something because I couldn't see him very well was sitting on a power line. Um, and there was um, a cluster of hollies below him, and I could hear sparrows going in and out. And one flew a bit too far out of the hollies, and this bird that I thought was a blue jay dropped down so fast that I couldn't believe it, knocked the sparrow to the ground, and then seemed to completely stop his momentum, spin around, and pounce on him. And it literally took my breath away. And ever since then, I've just been so impressed with these birds. So, visionary, blue crown for the king of little birds, sharp eyes, sharp beak, warrior markings on face, black banded tail, brown and blue striped back and wings. Everything distinctive, white breast to blend in with sky as he hovers above, waiting for the sparrow to venture too far from safety of limb and bush. Barely the size of blue jay, mourning dove, truth belied by beauty, and grace as it starts its dive, then turns on a dime multiple times to catch its prey mid flight. And from what many consider most beautiful bird to what many consider not so much. But I've always liked buzzards. I grew up on a chicken farm, so I was pretty familiar with them. Um, and I love their kind of special place that they hold in the whole cycle of life. So that's what this poem is really about. And I love this photo. To be honest, I wanted to read this poem more so you could see the photo than hear the poem. So the photos, by the way, are by local photographer Clayton Joe Young. I've collaborated with him, I think, on 3 different books now. Um, and I think this is probably my favorite. He really did well with these photos. Buzzard. Always when we look up at white clouds, blue sky, we see that chevron of a bird not flying but floating, heavenly V teetering between here and there, silently keeping 2 worlds we imagine apart, together, connecting earth to sky, life to death. Check mark that says Everything is as it should be. None will make it to eternity. Fear of your inevitability, our greatest motivation. And I can speak personally. I actually had a customer at the coffee shop yesterday. Um, the haiku book just arrived yesterday, and she picked it up and she was glancing through it and she saw a haiku. I don't even remember which one it was now, but I think it uses the word inevitable, and she remembered that poem. And she said, "So how are you doing with this inevitability now?" And I smiled, almost laughed, and said, "Yeah, I'm still loving it. I mean, what greater motivator than death could we ever hope for?" I turned 61 earlier this year, so I figure anything I have to say, I better say it soon. Speaking of having things to say, this is my Mockingbird poem. Growing up in North and South Carolina and Georgia, I have lots of experience with mockingbirds. This one happened though. This is something I love to tell my students. One of the things that I tell them is you have to get busy as a writer. You can't just sit in your ivory tower and expect to have anything to write about. You have to get out and experience things. And one of the best things you can do, frankly, is go to writers' conferences, go to readings, meet other writers. And I mean it for all the right reasons. But, well, actually, I'm going to hold on to the second part of that thought for a little bit later. So, this poem, I don't really believe in inspiration per se. The poem just popped up in my head whole, and I didn't have to do anything but write it down, except for this poem. It pretty much happened with this poem. I was teaching a workshop at Isothermal Community College in Spindale, and as I was talking and engaging with the people in attendance, I heard this mockingbird going through this whole litany of songs, and I felt myself getting more and more distracted by the sounds of the mockingbird. And then I got distracted not by the sounds of the mockingbird, but by the words that I was mentally writing to talk about it. And so I actually told this happened. All there is to say, if it happens that you find yourself at the front of a room full of people, listening to all you have to say about what you think you know, and suddenly you hear from an open window you hadn't even noticed was open, the voice of a mockingbird, as clear as the voice of God, singing in every language at once, you owe it to yourself, and all with the possibility of hearing, to stop in the almost silence and say out loud, "Listen." And I did that, and most of the people there knew exactly what I was talking about. I think they had been distracted by the mockingbird as well, so it was just perfect. Let's see, there it is. Our page numbers turns out don't quite match up. So no, I'm sorry, wrong one. I am on page 46, Malika. Go back one. Back one more. There you go. That's it. All right. In this poem, I mention a wonderful friend of mine who I miss greatly, Tony Abbott or Anthony Abbott, in his poem, The Girl in the Yellow Raincoat. So, speaking of workshops and such, I wrote this at a North Carolina Writers Network workshop held at Wrightsville Beach. Been a little while ago since I wrote this, but still one that I care a lot about. Crossing the causeway to Wrightsville Beach. Oh, I should mention that I was literally heading to, I don't remember the hotel or the convention center, wherever it was held. I was literally heading to that in the morning, and got kind of held up by a group of runners. And while I was sitting there waiting for them to pass, I noticed the cormorants overhead. And I was thinking about Tony Abbott's poem, which he had read the night before, and this whole thing just kind of came together to this poem. Crossing the causeway to Wrightsville Beach. The cormorants line up above the causeway, their morning posture of feeding as ancient as trees, older than even the first iambic lines. We drive beneath them and rarely take notice, not even of the stickleback sky full of clouds that has lingered beyond them longer than reckoning. I pull off the road to write down the line. I pull off the road as if it mattered even more than destinations, than the timelessness of cormorants perched above the road, that I get these lines down because, what? They have something vital to say. They're all I have in the face of eternity. They, like young girls running, help fend off the darkness. I've read my friend's poems in which he still mourns the loss of his daughter some 40 years in the past, the grief as fresh in his mind as what he had for breakfast mere moments ago. The sun is bright before me, the road blurred with runners, each one carefully preparing for what they'll face. I think of my own daughter and how she'll grow up one day if she survives the shattered windshield, aggression of microbes, cruel hand of fate. And given the gained availability of time, I'll no longer have to write on roadsides. Peace at home, endless opportunity, and nothing but absence left to consider. So the good news about that poem is, now I'm in that stage where my daughter has left home. I have a lot more than absence to consider, so that's the good news. Maybe the bad news is I still don't seem to have any more time to write at home. So, fortunately, I do greatly enjoy writing on roadsides, and that's why I love to travel to give readings and go to conferences and that sort of thing. And I was going to do one more, and we're a little bit off on the pages again. Go, let's see. This is called Watcher, so I think. Let's see, where's that? Oh yeah, no, you're right. Okay, sorry. And another thing that I tell my students is that you never stop on a poem, revise until you die, basically. And since you can see the page, you'll notice that I've made a couple of changes in this one already, updating essentially. Um, Watcher. I've seen 346 species of birds so far, not counting those seen in captivity. My first outing looking for birds was 1984 in Athens, Ohio. I didn't know then I would ever do this again, so I didn't keep track of what I saw, but I remember learning the difference between field sparrow and chipping, and I remember the amazing blue of indigo buntings. My biggest day was on the Outer Banks in November 1990. I spent hours at Pea Island watching tundra swans and snow geese and ibises before heading to other spots to see green and blue-winged teals, avocets, and night herons. And that evening, from the ferry to Ocracoke, I saw the only gannet I have ever seen. I saw 134 different species that day. Before we were married, I took my wife on a driving bird tour near Orlando. We saw herons and egrets, bald eagles and osprey, grebes and mergansers. She smiled, and I think had fun, but made clear she never wanted to do it again. My friend Pris sends me photos from South Florida of birds that come to the pond in her backyard that I might never see for myself. Reddish egrets, spoonbills, black-bellied whistling ducks. I saw a magnificent frigate bird once, in Charlotte, North Carolina, of all places, flying high overhead, undoubtedly blown off course by a passing storm. I see great blue herons everywhere, even where there is no water, so much so that I call them my totem bird. But seeing 30 at once in a parking lot behind a fish house in Destin, all of them standing 4 feet above the ground like buoys out of water, is a sight I'll never forget. I park near a dense holly hedge each morning, and the chatter, squawk, squeal of sparrows going in and out is enough to make me think there must be millions. But one morning there was nothing, not a murmur, not a peep. Moving closer to look inside, a barred owl flew out so close I could feel his wings brush my face. My latest lifer, off the coast of Nova Scotia, were huge flocks of puffins, birds as cute as puppies that spend their lives at sea, mostly coming among us to breed or feed their young. There are nearly 10,000 species of birds in the world. I'll never see a tenth of those, but trying will at least ensure that I'm always paying attention. Thank you. And are we doing
That's
we're
just what I
doing
was
the,
going to ask you. I can go to the other one now. Let me get there real quick and hang on. Huh. It's not giving me the page now.
oh, that's okay. I mean,
Okay,
um,
we'll go
these,
without.
so eventually is a collection of haiku, and this is my first collection of haiku. I've been writing haiku about as long as I've been writing anything. Um, and the artist, some of you may have seen my book of poems for children called World's Enough. The artist for that book was a Hickory area artist named Missy Cleveland. Actually, this is, Malika pointed out, this is one of Missy's full size works behind me here. And I absolutely love her work. So when I got ready to do this book, I had an I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted a book that was smaller so that each haiku could be on a page of its own without looking odd. Sometimes I think it's odd with a full size book to have this little haiku sitting in the middle of the page. So I wanted it smaller, and I also wanted what do they call them? Pencil sketches, line sketches, very simple illustrations. And so Missy did 33 of those for the book. So that's all in here. And I'm just going to pick out a few. I actually taught haiku to my students today. And I used, because there's often such confusion about haiku, I used the definition from the Haiku Society of America, which is printed in the book as well. A short poem that uses imagistic language to convey the essence of an experience of nature or the season intuitively linked to the human condition. So, the whole question of, okay, 17 syllables or less, 575, there's a lot of uneducating that you have to do sometimes with students. So I wanted to get away from the whole 575 limitation and focus more on the nature of really um, capturing that moment. So these haiku are kind of all over the place. There are actually a couple that could be considered concrete poems. There are some that do follow the 575 idea. I do think all of them are 17 syllables or less, and some are um, more than 3 lines. So I'll read a variety of the ones that I like best. This is the first one in the book. And I pointed out to my students that it has that nice ambiguity that you often find in haiku, where we might agree on what it says, but in terms of what it means, that's kind of left up to the individual. In the beginning, God could think of nothing better than this. In the first section of the book, could be the poems primarily focus on beginnings, if you will, maybe inspiration, but things really starting and getting going. And this one I actually read to my students today as well, and pointed out again the ambiguity of the haiku. The origami my daughter made, wings unfurling. And I cheated on this one. It's in both books. So every once in a while, I will, when a poem fits perfectly in another book, I'll use it again. And this one just happened to fit perfectly in both books. Um, Out of a class of 7 students, I have one big class and one small class. And out of this class of 7 students, only 2 knew what a whippoorwill was, which I find really disappointing. Now, one of them was born in California, so I can forgive her, but the others, I don't know. Sound of night gathers at open window. Whippoorwill. For the students who didn't know what a whippoorwill was, I had to do the whistle, and they said instead of saying whippoorwill, I should do the whistle as the last line, which I kind of like, but I'm afraid at this time of night my mouth's a little too dry to pull that off. I do want to show you this one if I can get close enough. This is one of the ones. Whew, I'm no good at this. Wow, it's backwards and upside down and everything.
It's so much harder.
Yeah, it is. So this is 17 syllables, but it's about a tree. So making a flat 3-line poem just didn't seem appropriate. So I stretched it out, and I actually love what happens when I stretched it out. All but the first line has 2 syllables, and it really, I think, forces the reader to slow down and puts emphasis um, on what I think the poem is about. The old oak has lost more leaves than most, has learned to let more light shine through. I've always felt like that poem is more about how to age gracefully and patiently than it is about a tree, although I love that it has the tree in it as well. So this will be a test, and I actually, Donna, you still there? Yep, she's still here.
Yeah,
Donna,
I'm there.
you can't say anything, okay?
Okay, I
All right.
promise.
Donna heard me read this up at the folk school, so she knows my question. First off, hopefully enough of you grew up in the country that you remember those yellow porch lights. Yeah, I see some nodding. I don't know why, but for years all the porch lights were yellow. And someone up in the mountains told me, well, it's because they thought that bugs didn't like the yellow light. And I'm like, well, that didn't work at my house where I was growing up. The bugs loved the yellow light. But anyway, yellow porch light illuminating darkness, swirl of candle bats. So here's the question. What's a candle bat? We determined this, the reading up in the mountains, I think everyone up there, or most people up there, were born in the South. And no one else was familiar with the term candlebat. But where I grew up in Greenwood, South Carolina, everyone I knew called moths candlebats. And I've always thought it was a very poetic phrase, so I don't want it to go away. One person did say down in Georgia they called them candle flies. That's close, but I like
Candlebat is better.
I like candlebat better too. And one section of the book is all about working in the garden. If I had my druthers, if I could have my way every day, I would spend several hours working in the yard, and then I would sit down and write some, and then I would go teach something, and then I would come back and work in the yard again. It's something I love to do, and I used to keep count. You know how I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say you. I've always liked counting things, so I don't want to rope everyone else into that. It's probably a personal thing. Um, but I used to keep count of how many things I had planted. In fact, it was on my bucket list when I turned 14. My very first bucket list was that I wanted to plant 2,000 trees before I died. And I passed that like in my 30s, and I've continued to plant, but I stopped counting once I reached that number. And so this is the next to last poem. I've planted this much to be sure at the end the ground will take me back. And then the final poem.
I'm going to ask you to read that one again, Scott. I kind of need to hear it.
I've planted this much to be sure at the end the ground will take me back. Oh, I skipped one. I can't read that one yet. Sorry. This is actually one of my favorites. Well, don't need to see it. I know this one. This is a 5-word haiku, and I challenged my students today to write an effective poem that's only 5 words. So we'll see what they come up with. You all remember the children's rhyme, starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight, wish I may. Yeah. So it was very common when I was growing up anyway to go outside around dusk and try to spot the first star, and then you got to make a wish on it. I always thought this goes back to the counting. There's a theme here. I wanted to then spot the second star and the third star and the fourth star and the fifth star. And of course, at some point, and this was kind of the game, I guess, was to see how high I could get in counting before I could no longer keep track of, well, oh, was that one there first? Or, oh no. So, the numbers didn't matter anymore. So it's a 3-line haiku. First line has 1 word, second line has 2 words, and the last line has 2 words. One by one, the stars. And the final haiku, I think it's just a simple truth in a lot of ways. If I return, it will not be as I was.
Oh,
And I do have one extra haiku. I have this really bad habit of writing a perfect poem. So right after I wrote the bird book, I wrote a poem called Birds Are Real. And I was like, why couldn't I have written that just 2 weeks earlier? And then right after we were finished with Eventually, I wrote this haiku. And backstory real quick. My son, when he was a student, and this is one of the things I try to get through to my students, is you have to pay attention to your attention, even if it doesn't make sense to you. So when something happens and it takes you back to something else, that's important. And you got to pay attention to, why did it take you back? What was meaningful about that? So right after, like I said, I was done with this book, I got in my head this memory of my son sending me a photo when he worked in the library at UNC Greensboro of him pulling a book of mine off the stacks in the UNCG library, which it was a big deal for me. I was like, oh, they have my book in the library. That's awesome. But I also remember in the photo, I could tell that the pages had already yellowed. And now, as I'm finishing this book, that moment comes back to me and results in this poem. Yellowed pages, even words will turn to dust eventually. And talk about perfect, that's the title of the friggin' book, and I didn't have that poem to go in it until too late. All right. You got some, what do you want to do?
that is really rotten that poem would come after the book is done. It's so
It'll work
fabulous.
its way into the next book.
Yeah, maybe it's leaping off points or what connects one book to the next or sparks something. But I
Allie just
enjoy so.
Allie just posted a note calling it maybe that's poetic injustice, and
That's fabulous. Poetic injustice. We can all unmute everybody, and I know people have questions for Scott, but I first want to just say, wow, that was amazing.
Wonderful. Woo!
Very special.
Oh, Regina, how'd you get those party hats? Where is that?
Okay, so if you go to, I have a little heart that says react at the bottom of my screen. It's right on Zoom. Like if I see a little heart, and beside the little that says react, and then you click the arrow. Wait a minute, not the arrow. You just click the heart, and it will have reactions, or you can send it with an effect, or those kind of.
Yeah, I see Donna's doing it too. I don't have a React. I guess I don't get reactions. I'll just have to make my faces. I'll figure it out. It's got to be somewhere.
Yeah, you might have to redo something, like, what is it? Not reboot.
Update
check
yours.
something off.
Update. That's right. Just update.
Ah, well, the party made me happy, so that's awesome. Does anybody have any question for Scott or things that
I'm
struck
reading
you? I
through the
know
comments. I'm loving these comments.
I was gonna say, I'll send them to you. Yeah,
Oh.
jump in, Ron.
Whoop. So Scott, I think I mentioned this in some other event like this. I think last time you were with this group, you're one of my favorite poets in North Carolina, and I just what strikes me about your poetry and what I heard today, confirmed and amplified many times, is how, I mean, poetry is about ideas and to a certain extent, but if the ideas don't bring you to a very deep feeling about the world and a sense of mystery, then the ideas are just ideas, and you just do that in spades. And one of my favorite poets. And I think of you in the same vein as one of my real favorite poets of previous times was, oh my God, I'm so upset about my house being half destroyed. William Stafford, sorry. And you have things like birds speaking back to us. And he has a line in his poem called that says, what the river says, that is what I say, in a poem called Ask Me. And I feel that same effect that Stafford gives, in that poem, in a lot of your poetry. And the last thing I want to say, sorry, some long-winded, but I just to a comment that I typed in, you reveal how rich in number the fauna, the one about ferry to Ocracoke and identifying 137 or something like that, some large number. But when we all walk around, we don't see 137 different species of stuff. We just see there's a bird, and you're bringing that alive to us, the kind of multitudinous, the pure number of fauna, the richness of it. So that's another thing that you bring out. And so I just salute you like crazy for it.
Thank you, Ron. It's very flattering to be compared to Stafford at all. He's certainly a poet that I admire greatly. And I'm not sure my wife would agree with you on the noticing the number of birds. She complains quite often that when she's talking to me, my eyes drift out the window. And every time she asks me, what am I doing? I say, well, there's a bird right there. And it's a compulsion. I've got to look. So.
I'm glad that you do, though. And I was going to dovetail with what Ron said. I think it's interesting, seeing somebody's body of work over time. And one of the things I think that has always resonated about your work with me is authenticity and really close to the bone, looking at like trauma and our humanness, our humanity. And then this growing sense of wonder and awe that's always been kind of a river in your work, it now feels like so much more and larger. And I am just really enjoying that, how always you've been able to work on one level that had underneath of it a multitude of different meanings or things that it carried with it. But it's lovely to see how that keeps coming to fruition. It's a very curious mind that engages with writing, to me. Just it's lovely. And so not so much a question. I guess we're not throwing around questions, are we, people? We're just going to praise them. Okay, that's fine. We can do that.
I got the book and it's lovely. And I love the fact that you have the pictures with this. You don't find many poetry books that or publishers that will even allow you to have the photographs with the poetry. And I wish I wish more publishers did that, but it's a beautiful book, Scott.
Thank you. The only weakness of having the photographs is it drives up the price of the book. So
Sure.
every time I sell one of those, I feel guilty. I'm like, I've got to charge $30 for that.
Well,
I'm sorry, but
it is well spent. So
Photographs are amazing. I mean, I think it holds up as a whole. But I get that. But I mean, even the buzzard has such a dignified, like that is a gorgeous picture.
yeah, that'll
So
make you like buzzards.
Could I
it's
ask a
amazing.
question? Can
Sure.
you hear me?
Please, Patrick, that'd be great.
I wasn't sure if I had to check in or do something, but
Oh, we're happy you're here.
well,
Jump
thank
in.
you. I wondered, my wife's a photographer too, and we've done some work together with that. The poem preceded the photograph, right? But the book is, I think you know, Scott, the book is about the Manassas battlefield.
Right.
So we went to Manassas after our son started college and went away, and we're dealing with the empty nest. And she took photographs, and they work so well with the poems. But I wonder if any of the poems and auguries, I'm going to hold mine up too. I need to get this thing signed. I expected to get it signed the 8th when I was supposed to be at Hickory, but the world didn't turn out that way.
Aline had other ideas.
Yeah. So I wonder if any of these poems are ekphrastic poems. Or if they
Yes.
all, okay.
Yeah, I indicated earlier that this is the third collaboration that I've done with Joe. The very first one, he's this kind of a funny story. He sent me a batch of maybe 30 or 50 poems or photos, and I said, "Hey, have you ever thought about writing poems to go with photos?" And I had already started an ekphrastic poetry event here at the Hickory Museum of Art that had been going on for a couple of years. So I told him, "Yeah, absolutely, I do it all the time." And he said, "Well, would you mind? Would you be interested in trying to write some poems for these, and then we can maybe do a book together?" And I said, "Sure." And I thought, okay, I'll get in touch with him in a couple of months. 2 weeks later, he wrote back saying, "Are you finished with those poems yet?" And I was
You're
like,
going to write
"Oh
them
my
on command,
goodness,
right? On demand.
I'm pretty prolific, but wow." So I
It's
I
a
got
lot
on.
of pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then going forward from there, our second collaboration was poems and photos of the Hickory area. Most of those, I knew what photos I wanted, and I was already working on the poems, but I didn't want to finish the poems until I saw the photos. So it was really kind of a combination. I would send them out to Hart Square, for example, to take a photo, and then I wanted to see the photo before I finished the poem that I had already started to make sure that they worked well together. And then with augury, I had most of the poems already, and I said, "Hey Joe, can you get photos of these?"
Yeah.
But then I did tell him if he had any other bird photos. For example, there's a kookaburra in there. I have seen a kookaburra, not technically. It's not on my count because the ones that I saw were in captivity, obviously. But it's such a good photo that I wanted to write a poem for it. So I found a way to write a poem for the kookaburra. And I think there's
That's great.
a great Eurasian owl in there as well. I've never seen a great Eurasian owl, but it was a nice photo. So I worked on a poem and just made it about owls in general instead of the great Eurasian owl.
And kookaburras are such cool birds, and I think there's a song about kookaburras.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
going to sing.
It's still stuck in my head from middle school or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Kookaburras are, and this is in the poem actually, the world's largest kingfishers. So and I love kingfishers, North American kingfishers, belted kingfishers, they call them. And if you know that they're related and you listen to the belted kingfishers song, you can hear the relation to the kookaburra song. So it's really kind of interesting that I don't think most people would, if they didn't know a lot about kookaburras, would not make that connection. But once you know, oh, they're related, then you hear it.
I'd like to know how you came up with this title. What inspired the title? I mean, how did you make that decision? It's a
I don't
lovely
really
title
know.
for the book.
I love the word augury. It's such a wonderful word, and I think with some of the bird poems that I was writing, I was touching on what indicators, what portents they used to see when they practiced augury with bird signs, if you will. So I think that's where I got the word augury in my head, and I thought, oh, that makes a nice title, An Augury of Birds.
Yes, it's very good.
Thank you. I've always liked the group names of birds, an exaltation of larks, all of that whole group, a congress of eagles, a murder of crows. These, they're great group names. So.
Like, yeah.
You wonder who got to do that because they're fabulous groupings. I mean,
really
they really are.
There's some great comical ones too. Plays on that type of naming, very comical. Some of them are pure genius.
You have a favorite, Ron?
I can't recall them right now. I just remember laughing my butt off listening to, instead of a convocation and stuff like that, they would have something that just like flipped everything over, and made you think of something else, and that was really funny. So I'm sorry, I'm telling a joke that I don't have any material for here.
Regina wrote the words to the song, and yeah, that's it, Regina.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Thank you for that memory too, as well, Scott.
And no one has a kookaburra as a pet because they're also called the breakfast bird because they wake up early and do that noise. And anyone who had a kookaburra for a pet would have strangled it long ago.
Yeah, no, it's bad enough having roosters and a donkey that start. I don't need something in the house that has an opinion on when I should get up.
Don't you reach a point where you no longer hear the roosters, though?
I can do pretty good. The donkey can bypass even my most, I'm determined to ignore.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he knows where my window is, and he has a way of pointing his mouth. That's my theory. And they have to have that sound because they're oftentimes loners in the desert and they need to be heard for miles. And I can verify he can be heard for miles.
Yeah.
Well, they certainly have the intelligence and the mischievous nature to do that.
Oh, yes, I would agree 100% because I would come home from work sometimes and he would be next door in the cornfield eating whatever he wanted. And I finally saw what he'd do. He'd roll underneath the bottom hot wire and then roll back into his pasture and act like he had done nothing wrong. So I had to do another string down there so he no longer had access to that. But how long he had been doing that, I have no clue. I came home early and caught him. Well, we are, if nobody has any more questions or thoughts, we can do open mic. And I did not take names ahead of time. So just jump in and we will roll with what we've got. Thank you again, Scott. It was so great to hear from two different books as well.
Well, I've got one. Scott mentioned things that are inevitable. And as I get older, I know that getting older, when I'm older, is inevitable. I hope anyway. This is called Breakfast of Champions. I don't know how many of you have woken up and found some new mark on your body that you didn't know was there. Mm-hmm. Breakfast of Champions. This morning at the breakfast table, sun over my shoulder, I notice an unfamiliar speck of something on my thumb. I try to scratch it off, but obstinance has a future here. It's another random change to get used to, with a cold glass of orange juice, the best omelet ever, and a side of sourdough toast.
Know that one. Thank you. Wonderful. So I have Regina and then Allie, Shamala, and Christy. So let me come to
one also when the time comes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I will come to you. Yep. I got you, Regina.
Hi, everybody. Scott, that was just great.
Thank you.
your haiku inspired me. Your haikus inspired me. And I'm admittedly that's not the genre in which I write most frequently, but I have written a few and have broken probably every rule to be
Good
broken.
job.
This one is entitled oh, I, Harriet. And it's interesting because I have a book coming out at the beginning of the year, and I thought I put this in the manuscript and it didn't make it. So I'm going to try to go back and figure out how to do that. It kind of follows the theme. I, Harriet. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God is gonna trouble the water. I see Harriet pulling pin soles out from clay, scraping matted eyes. I hear Harriet, golden black, steadfast resolve, etching promise path. I feel Harriet. She echoes through weary souls. Keep moving or die. I move, Harriet, from grave to sky to guide us. Star settled in skin. I am Harriet, bathed in black light prophecy, cloaked in new mission. I, Harriet, cries, insistent cadence rings clear, come into the woods. I, Harriet, lives, keep eyes stayed on lands of hope. Oh, wisdom pours free. Born from Mother Star, she invites our children, those looking for her star. They find her gazing. She imparts ancient wisdom that fires the sky.
I was unmuted. I mean, I was muted. That was gorgeous.
Thank you.
Make sure you check the comments because some of us were hitting the same line, especially she echoes through weary souls. Thank you, Regina. Allie, I'm coming to you.
Thank you, Scott, again for that amazing reading. I felt like some of the poems, even if they didn't start as ekphrastics, they sort of had that quality, that like very close attention. And I think that was like a really beautiful part of your work, which I've never read before. So it was beautiful to see the attention you brought to things. And then quick bird story before I launch into this poem. When I moved to Oakland with my husband, the first bird that we saw that I'd never seen before is actually like the bird of Oakland, which is the black-crowned night heron. And I saw it and I tried to like figure out what it was just from like the brief glimpse that I had of it. And that was a trip down Google, but I finally figured out what it was. And then I figured out that around the corner, there's a bar called the Night Heron. So it apparently was not as hard as I was making it. This is a poem about me learning to pay attention. I have a bit of anxiety, so this is me learning to pay attention to the fact that I'm not as good of a fortune teller as I think I am. So this is what goes wrong. My notebook does not fall over the ledge of the bathtub. The ink doesn't swirl black-green in the tepid water. I doubt my skills with a knife, but so far I've only managed to slice a fingernail. It's true, most of what's broken can't be seamlessly replaced, but the heart makes room for a new set of glasses. You worry about killing the orchid. You worry about dropping your phone in the gap between craft and dock, between bridge and plane, but it has not stumbled overboard while attempting to capture the size of the glacier. It is not knocked waterward by wayward elbows craning for a better look. Instead, you drop it up the stairs and crush the glass into concrete. We don't miss the flight, or we do, but are reseated on the next one, and no one at the party seems to hate us, even if sometimes I stand a bit too far from the conversations, trying to decide which branch to alight on. Rejection does not sting as badly as a tattoo, and even the tattoo needle eventually stills its high-pitched hum. Still, you forget something, no matter how well you've organized your suitcase. Friends detach and wobble away like loose teeth. You lose teeth in your dreams and they're gone forever. Milk sours. Spores hitch an itchy ride in your socks. The song is actually the most aggravating noise you've ever heard. Then at 3 a.m., you wake to the sound of rain from the bathroom ceiling.
Very nice.
Whew. Wow. Love that. Rejection does not sting as badly as a tattoo. Oh, definitely, Allie, check the chat section. I've got Shamala, Christy, Patrick, Glenn, and Ron. If I've missed anybody, say something to me. Oh, good, Karen. I gotcha. Shamala, I'm coming to you.
Can I share my screen, Malika?
Sure. Give me 1 moment. Let's see, what's the best way to do this? I have to do it this way.
I think you make me co-host. I can share my
I
screen.
do. That's what I'm doing. You should have it now.
Cool. Pressing the button. Scott, thank you so much for these wonderful poems about birds. I wander around staring at birds too, so and I'm infinitely distractible, but they are worth the time, and I'm really grateful to have met your work and the work of that photographer too, which is amazing. So this is a bird-shaped poem, which is why I wanted to share the screen. And there's a longer, and I think there's a better version in my forthcoming chapbook, but this is what it looked like, shorter and as a bird. Icarus. They clipped my tail feathers so I could not fly. The feathers grew back. They told me this was impossible. They told me that the feathers were not real. I thank whichever lockpick broke the secret, which thought or word or random gift of air showed me their lie. Look, I am flying, dancing in the clear, cool air. Thanks.
I had to wait till you stopped screen share so I can see how to unmute myself. Thank you so much, Shamala. I love the shape of that. I'm coming to Christy next. And here we go, Christy. You ready?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Scott, you made me want to try haiku again. I've never figured it out, but now I want to try. This poem I'm going to read tonight came after I read Mike James's book, Back Alley Saints at the Tiki Bar. And it was just published this week in Chiron Review. So I want to read it tonight for Mike. Lessons learned while drinking with Back Alley Saints at the Tiki Bar. Claim a piece of driftwood, record its truth. Record your truth in its rings. Breathe in the direction you want your life to take. Dig into the detour you're probably being led. If the journey sours, brush your teeth. Leave the floss behind. A trail of mistakes can set a left right. Let bonfires teach you to lick the highest points of light. Sing to your favorite clogs if you want them to dance with you. Never lasso a lightning bolt with a leash. Forage familiar pockets for what you forgot to know in your bones. Thank you.
I love that one, Christy. That just makes me happy. Yeah, sing to your favorite clogs. I don't even have a pair. Now I got to get one so I can sing to them. That may not make them my friend, though. I'll think about that one. Patrick, I'm coming your way.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My head is so big. Okay. Scott, thank you for that reading. I really appreciated it. I think that we probably didn't say enough about the haiku, which is a really popular form, and it's taken a lot of shapes. But I wanted to say that I have a former graduate student from ECU by the name of Chris Salerno. And Chris is very concerned about the impact of Chat GPT on the writing of his creative writing students. So he submitted one of his poems to analysis there. And I thought that I only had a couple of minutes, so I thought that I would submit a haiku. And Chat GPT is a new critic because you counted the number of syllables, the number of lines, and then where the ambiguity comes in the third, where it ought to, in the third line, it said, well, change it to this because some people won't get it. So there we have it. I don't know. I wanted to, my wife's sister lived in Spruce Pine, or lives in Spruce. She's still there, which you might know is up near Asheville. And we lost track of her for about 5 days. And then a couple nights ago, she called and she had a good conversation, and that wasn't enough. She called again the next morning. There's a lot going on out there, and my heart goes out to them. So I thought I would read this poem for her. It's entitled A Tornado Watch, a Thunderstorm Warning. Knowing how lightning introduces the summer sky, my children close the windows, take cover beneath pillows beside the broken basement steps, and tolerate the expected weather. During tornado week at school, they learned not to depend upon a tornado's sense of direction. Like drunken panhandlers, tornadoes wobble across the street next to your home and find you wherever you hide. Sometime after the storm begins, my daughter remembers, always keep a window open. So she rushes to the living room where she lifts the window so slightly, only the tornado will feel the subtle opening, the secret release of pressure. And the hopeless dog follows her back, forcing itself into the narrow tunnel between the stairs and wall until someone lifts him with pity and holds him against the weather, against lightning that splits our lives into sections only one person can enter at a time.
Wow, that last line. Only one person can enter at a time. There's so much to that. Loved it. Check the chat section again. Yeah, I especially the way you started it too, I want to go back to it because I wrote that down, knowing how lightning introduces the night sky. I love our open mic for this reason. It always kicks some butt. Glenn, I'm coming to you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Scott, when you said revise until you die, that's me. So the poem I'm reading, this file has 15 pages. Each page is an edit of the poem. The first draft was 2008, and it was just published last month in the Carnegie Mellon University student newspaper. And so this is Panther Hollow Bridge Centennial, 1997. Carnegie's University rises in the east, laboratories where engineers train, etching paths to the future over silicon. Carnegie's museum sits above the west, ruins of Greece and Rome, dinosaur bones retracing paths to the past. All day the bridge carries Pittsburgh between past and future, while the hollow beneath collects old houses and worn-out factories, like a gap between sofa cushions filling with crumbs and lost pennies. The road through the hollow runs skew to the bridge, neither parallel nor intersecting, people above and below passing in separate dimensions. The steel arch leaps the ravine, graceful as the bronze panthers guarding the bridge's entrance, while the hollow spills on down to the river and the empty rail yards where the steelwork stood when the bridge was built, when steel built Carnegie's fortune, when slender metal trusses erected gleaming paths to the future.
That is a gorgeous poem, Glenn. And I have to say, part of what was happening is the sounds alone were taking me on a journey. I almost was trying not to get meaning from it just so I could enjoy the sounds. I don't know what that says about me. But definitely check the chat section. It just I
Oh,
got
thanks.
lost in that. I've got Ron and then Karen. Coming to you, Ron.
Sorry. I'm good now. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. All right. I had a peach tree in my backyard, which didn't know about when I was still married and my ex-wife and my daughter were living with me, and my daughter and I shared the first peach one season. So this is called First Backyard Peach. My daughter and I, hip to hip over the sink, nectar raining wild. We dig down to the stone, the fruit-bearing heart, smack our lips, and for one smile, we're no longer a failed family. The three of us back at the center of things, the future running sweet.
Wow. The three of us back at the center. That is powerful. Thank you, Ron. Yeah, that's an image. Yep, the future running sweet. And my beautiful co-host, coming to you, Karen.
Oh gosh, there's my big face on the screen. Uh, okay, I just have to say I've so enjoyed this reading tonight, and these open mic poems are just fabulous. And so I'm going to read something that a lot of you have probably heard. I haven't read it in a while. I love this poem. I don't know why it hasn't been published yet. It did get a honorable mention nod in a contest, but anyway, this is one of my bird poems, and I just love it. So I'm going to read it, even though some of you have heard it. This is P.S. Before Nightfall. The grackles fly in with quick, fast brush strokes, in flocks of 10 or a dozen or 20 or more, painting in the coming on of dusk. With purple-black flourishes, they punctuate the tips of the silver-gray bones of the oaks rising up from the edge of the smudge of the meadow. They gather the fortune of the round gold coins of their so many eyes and sing the exquisite cacophony of these moments, holding on with dactyl grip to the swayings of limbs. They conduct the settling down of the rhythms of this day. And then, with staccato eruptions of wing beats and ecstasies of swoopings and rising, falling loopings and synchronized swimmings through currents of sky, they syncopate the celebration of this symphony of twilight, dropping down to rally in reeds of bamboo, signaling a settling in to the closing up of this day. The grackles aren't hope on wing or on perch, but they are enough to consider as the scribbled note of this day you'll crease and fold up, ragged edges and all, and slip into night's waiting, ever-present dark pocket. Grackles, y'all.
Karen, that was fabulous. They are, yeah.
Grackles.
I mean, just a beautiful, and I would say there's this magazine I've heard of called Redheaded Stepchild, and that poem has never crossed my desk.
Oh,
So, yeah,
thanks for that hint.
you might want to think about that, but what a great way to end. Perfect, guys. Thank you all so much for being here. Scott, as always, just humbling and beautiful to celebrate those two books. And everybody, open mic, killer kick ass. Donna, we're thinking of you and Ron, and everybody that has been affected. Scott and his family, they helped a coffee shop. They brought up a huge amount of supplies to someone who couldn't get supplies. It was the only thing open in that whole neighborhood, is what you said, Scott. I just encourage you to find ways. It can be heavy with the grief. And one of the ways we start letting that flow is finding where we can make a difference, whether it's a phone call to someone or something you can give. Thanks,
So-
guys.
So Malika,
Thank you.
I wanted to say real
Yeah.
quick that, for 2 weeks now, I felt at sea. And it's really important to me to do some normal things, some familiar things, and to be with people I feel connected with. And this has just been amazing for me. I mean, emotionally, far beyond the other ones even at this time. So thank you.
I hear that. Ron, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, Scott just reminded us too, if you're driving through Hickory, come see him at Tasteful of Beans. It's a great coffee house. It's just everything. But Ron, it's good to see you. And it is important, this has been a touchstone for a lot of us since the pandemic. Our first one was March 13th, 2020.
Mhm. Yep.
And I thought we'll do this for a couple weeks. It's been a little bit, a couple of weeks time some. All right, guys, be well. See you next week.
Bye.
Thanks.